Welcome back to Slam Presents Hoop Ties with your boy, Ahmad K. Smith. I am the one and only. On today's show, we have a very, very special guest, Brady Hawk, Miami Heat's lead writer from 5 Reasons Sports. But first and foremost, I want to talk about a lot of talks about LeBron James and what he's potentially going to do. Is he going to retire? Is he going to come back? I don't think LeBron James is going to retire. Let's get that out the way. I think he has 2 more years on his contract that he signed prior to the season. It was a 2-year, $90 million deal. But I kind of understand LeBron James' frustration. And then people got to understand that LeBron James is not going to play forever. He's 38 years old. We're starting to see, I'm not going to say father time, because from a game standpoint, his game is still there. His game has always been there. But over the course of his Lakers career, the father time part has been coming with the nagging injuries that he has basically been happening with him since he's been with the Los Angeles Lakers for what? I think it's 6 years. So that's when we're seeing what, for a body standpoint, a mental standpoint, it's just like, yo, he came out and said, I can still play at a high level. I'm still better than 90 to 95% of the league itself. And people are talking about, okay, that's 45. He said he's a top 45 player. He was being humble and basically just talking about, a 90 and 95%. He was just throwing out a number. LeBron James, arguably, when he's healthy, is still a top 10 player in the game. And then, to be honest, it's probably in that 7 to 10 range. We just saw a guy come off a losing effort in, game 4 with the Los Angeles Lakers against the Denver Nuggets, where he dropped, almost a 40-point triple-double. So the talent in the game is still there. But the problem is, he probably felt just a little frustrated and just kind of like, I don't know what I want to do, because the Los Angeles Lakers had a golden opportunity, and LeBron James knew that. And that's the reason why he didn't get the foot surgery. That's the reason why he played through an injury. That's the reason why, the Los Angeles Lakers, even though overall their season was a success, when we talk about having a 0.2 chance to make the playoffs, after they started 2-10, and all the hurdles and all the adversity that they went to and getting on new players and things of that nature. But it was a success. But in LeBron James' eyes, because he's one of those players like a Michael Jordan, like a Kobe, even like a Stephen Curry as well. He's one of those players that feels like, yo, if I didn't go to the finals at least, or if I didn't win the finals, to me, it's a failure. So that's where I sense the frustration for LeBron James, because his body was on the line. He was doing everything he was supposed to do. And also he looked at this season where he kind of smelled blood. The reason why they went and was able to go all the way to the Western Conference Finals and beat the defending champs and stuff like that. But they unfortunately lost to a better team in the Denver Nuggets, and a young Denver team that's never really, just went to their first ever finals appearance, So he smelled blood, and this was a golden opportunity for him to get his 5th championship. And we don't know how many opportunities LeBron James is going to have going forward in the future. So that's where the frustration comes. That's when the talk of retirement comes. That's when the talk about mentally, yo, do I want to do this anymore? So I'm not going to say I feel for LeBron, but I understand his standpoint of how he feels when it comes to his frustration. But do I think that he's going to retire? No, I do not think he's going to retire. No, I do not think he's going to leave the game. I feel like he still has another few years of playing at a high level, probably another year playing at elite level when we talk about a top 10 player in the game. But probably afterwards, if the Los Angeles Lakers can kind of figure out what they want to do going forward for this team, because they have a great squad. They can run it back. But the problem is Anthony Davis, I don't believe, can be a consistent number one option for his scoring standpoint. He can be the best player on your team, but from a scoring standpoint, for say, here, take me to the promised land, that's not Anthony Davis. LeBron James at this age, he can't do that every single game in the playoffs. And to be honest, he doesn't need to do it in the regular season as well. So it's just you have to find a player who can kind of carry on that mantle of being the number one scoring option in the regular season, and also being a number one half-court threat in the postseason as well. Their team is fine. They have the shooters. They have the defensive specialists, but you still need another guy that can really allow LeBron James to kind of play the secondary playmaker on the team, and also kind of be the third option during the regular season. And then in the playoffs, if you need him to be, if he's healthy enough, in key games and key moments and key series, he can still be that dude, and be that guy, or he can split the time being that guy with for Anthony Davis and another elite option. People are throwing out names with Kyrie Irving. People are throwing out names with Trae Young. People are throwing out names with, like, are they going to resign D'Angelo Russell? I don't know what they're going to do, but all I know is I've been saying it for several years. LeBron James needs a truly elite shot creator where when it's money time, where it's closing time, where he feels like he can trust. The last time he had that was Kyrie Irving. That's why Kyrie Irving's name to Los Angeles Lakers keeps being mentioned. Last time he had that also was Dwayne Wade. He needs somebody of that caliber and that ilk if he wants to go out and possibly win another championship, because unfortunately he can't do it every single day and night anymore in the regular season, and also in the playoffs. It's too hard to rely on a guy at his age to do that. And we know about Anthony Davis and his inconsistency at times. So that's just my take on LeBron James. That's my take on the Los Angeles Lakers. Still a hell of a season, still a hell of a run, and I expect LeBron James to be in training camp, because we know LeBron James is not going to retire without a farewell tour. And also he's mentioned that he wants to plan on playing with his son someday. And I as long as his son is going to USC and has the possibility of being a one and done potential draftee coming forward, I feel like we still got at least 2 years of LeBron James. But coming up, we have Brady Hawk once again for 5 Reasons Sports, the lead Miami Heat writer for 5 Reasons Sports. We're talking about Dwayne Wade. We're talking about Jimmy Butler. We're talking about Nikola Jokic. And we're also talking about LeBron James. What's at the best version of LeBron James with the Miami Heat? Coming up next. All right, we're back. Have a very, very special guest, Brady Hawk, lead Miami Heat writer from 5 Reasons Sports. How you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming on, man. Where are you from?
I'm from down here, Miami. So,
Miami 305?
yes. Well, actually, I'm a liar. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, but we just categorize everything as Miami for everybody else, it feels like.
So did you grow up a Miami Heat fan, I'm assuming?
Yes. So, just grew up. I'm younger, so I grew up in the big 3 days, which everybody hates to hear. That's my young side of things. So,
Younger?
yeah,
How old are you?
I'm 19.
Oh, shoot. You
Yeah.
super young.
Yes, sir.
So you grew up in that's crazy. You grew up in the Big Three era. Talk to me about the Big Three era.
I mean, man, it started when I was 7, so that puts a little perspective as a young
Yeah.
kid being able to watch that
Mhm.
era of basketball that way they just ran everything. So it was
Mhm.
big Dwayne Wade fan, obviously growing up, and obviously
Yeah.
the runs that they went on. So being able to cover now the Heat in general is obviously pretty cool.
Talk about the excitement during that time and just that run with LeBron James coming down there, Chris Bosh coming down there and teaming up with Dwayne Wade. It was a lot of energy, a lot of negative vibes from across the media outside of Miami. But how was it like just being down there and experience like those 3 guys playing together?
I mean, it felt like everybody down here was in a bubble because it felt like
Mhm.
everybody else was hating that team. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing like that. We'll never probably see anything like that again. Just the amount of pressure on a team, the amount of hatred it felt like against the team, and everything along those lines. But when you were a fan of that team, being able to watch the way they played every night, because it's not like now, like when we watch these teams and regular season feels meaningless, and the people talk about the playoffs being the real season. Like there
Yeah.
was regular season pressure on that team. So being able to
Mhm.
like Tuesday nights, it didn't matter what team they were playing. It was a show. So it was like it was just fun to watch in general being down here.
Yeah, I think it was to me arguably the greatest show that the league has probably seen with Dwayne Wade and prime LeBron James going down to South Beach. And to me, that was the best version of LeBron James. I feel like he was just
Mhm.
maxed out. When we talk about maxed out, I'm talking about like 100 in all categories: defense, scoring, like rebounding, everything, like shot making ability. And it was just kind of like it was very exciting. But like, as you said, LeBron James also came a villain down there with the
Yeah.
Miami Heat, and it was just kind of like nationally, it just felt like everybody was against the Miami Heat. I'm a Miami Heat fan. If I had to pick a team, that would be Miami Heat because I grew up a Dwayne Wade fan. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, so I don't really
Okay.
have like a team sort of say, but Dwayne Wade was my favorite player of all time. So just growing up, I kind of like looked up to Dwayne Wade and stuff like that. But I want to talk about this unusual run of this Miami Heat team that's with Jimmy Butler, with Bam Adebayo. Talk with me. Start with like the Miami Heat playing the Milwaukee Bucks and then go to like the Knicks and then go to like this current matchup. Like, give me the run of what kind of just happened, because I know you've been covering the Miami Heat since the playoffs started and stuff like that in the regular season. So talk to me about their run so far in the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, well, I'll set the stage and say that everything that we've learned in the regular season was completely thrown out the window pretty
Yeah.
much after that Chicago game. Like everything that we knew about this team and we felt like everybody could kind of put a pin on them, everything's kind of turned on its head in a little bit. So you see the way they played in that play-in game. They lose to the
Hmm.
Hawks. They head into Chicago game where they're down with 3 minutes left. They're playing it. They were down a good amount with 7 minutes left. They make a big comeback. Max Strus has a big game. Jimmy plays big down the stretch, and all of a sudden they're an 8 seed heading into Milwaukee. Uh,
Yeah.
and when I say everything turned on its head, you're talking about a team was 27th in the league in 3-point shooting. You're talking about where their role players just were not playing at the level that you wanted them to.
Yep.
And then you have a game one where they come out and they kind of punch Milwaukee in the mouth, and then they lose Tyler Hero, and it's like,
Yeah.
where do you do now? And it's like you
Mhm.
obviously have this play style you're already playing, and then now you lose your one of your best all around scorers, and they just have blown up from there, man. Like it was talked about that they just pretty much took advantage of the Giannis-less Bucks, and then all of a sudden Giannis comes back and they're still able to do this. I thought that in that Milwaukee series, the usage of Jimmy Butler, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but the usage of him across this playoffs has been the biggest thing to me, just because in that
Yeah.
Milwaukee series, it was pretty much just Jimmy's going to do Jimmy things on ball, and he's just going to go absolute nuclear, and he's going to go obviously the 56-point game in Game 4, but everything was
Mhm.
revolving around him. And the Bucks obviously didn't make too many adjustments to kind of go against him. They didn't throw any doubles at him, surprisingly, in that series. So he was just going one-on-one, and he was doing his thing, and obviously walked them into that big Game 5 kind of game-sealing buckets put into overtime, and they ended up moving on. And then you see the Knicks series where now it's talked about, well, the Knicks, they're tough. Like they play tough. They're going to use their physicality against you. So what did the Heat do? They somehow out-tough the New York Knicks in that series, and
Yeah.
they play a certain style. As much as I talked about Jimmy going that one-on-one range in that Milwaukee series, the Knicks series, as we saw, all they did was throw doubles at Jimmy. So you didn't see the big-time 50-point performances. You saw him
Mhm.
taking over games with his passing, just waiting for the double, just slowly making these reads. I just feel like he's had total control over this playoff run so far, and they obviously end up Bam had some big games toward the end of that series that
Yeah.
I thought was important.
Yeah.
And
Also, Kyle Lowry too.
correct, correct. They're role players, and that's the other storyline. As I mentioned, the role
Yeah.
players in the regular season, it's like you go down that list, every one of those players has had a moment. Like they've had a
Mhm.
couple moments at that. And then now you see they enter the Eastern Conference Finals. They've just the role player, the shooting tailed off in the Knicks series. It raised back
Mhm.
up, back to the level that they shot in the Bucks series in the Celtics run. Uh, and it's just back to them slow playing it. They just getting enough from everybody. I think they played a good defensive style. As much as I'm talking Jimmy, we should be talking about playoff Spo, because that's a guy that's just put these game plans from series to series, and it feels like he's outcoached every team he's played. Uh,
Yeah.
and now they sit up 3-1 in the Eastern Conference Finals, and it just doesn't feel like you could put your finger on one thing. It feels like there's just so many elements to it.
Yeah. It's a unprecedented run. That's the
Mm.
best way I can describe it. It's just like, it's crazy. This is probably the greatest run we're probably going to see from an eighth seed, and they have a chance to go on to do even more phenomenal things. Especially when you talked about the first round matchup with the Bucks. I felt like that was the perfect matchup. I would have been a little nervous if they would have played the Boston Celtics, even though they're playing the Boston Celtics right now and they're beating their ass
Yeah.
pretty much. But just their history with going up against Giannis Antetokounmpo, it feels like they're the only team that really matches up well with Giannis Antetokounmpo. You got Bam, you got they play four in for us, like stacking the paint, having one foot in the lane and things of that nature. And we know Giannis likes to drive, so that was very impressive. And you talked about the Knicks. How are you going to out tough the Knicks? But we know Heat culture is all about toughness. And I mentioned when you said about the New York Knicks, I mentioned Kyle Lowry because even though Jalen Brunson had a phenomenal series, it was a couple of those early games where Jalen Brunson got outplayed by Kyle Lowry and also Gabe Vincent. I felt like that was kind of like the catalyst to them going on and propelling to win that series. And then, like you said, the Boston series is going on right now, but no team has ever came back down 0-3 before 0-3. So we're going to
Mhm.
talk about like a potential finals matchup coming up. But I want to ask you, what does this potential ring, if Jimmy Butler goes out and Miami Heat wins a championship, what would this ring do for Jimmy Butler's legacy?
Man, this would be one of the best individual runs that we've seen in this league. I mean, there's certain guys I know we can point to Dirk on that one run. There's certain guys I know we can go down the list, but it's like
2011. Yep.
But these guys weren't an 8 seed. So it's like you're taking this roster being an 8 seed and going through an absolute plethora of teams. Like everything, if you put on your TV throughout the season and talked about the Eastern Conference, it's the Milwaukee Bucks and it's the Boston Celtics, and you ran through both of those on the way. And if in this potential ring that you're talking about, you're also taking out the best team in the Western Conference and the team that's everybody's talking about and the guy that was running for MVP. So this isn't one of those things where you're dodging bullets on the way and you're just kind of sliding through. So like they're confronting confrontation, and they just keep bullying these teams. So for Jimmy, I mean, if he gets a ring, like he has enough accolades, he has the even though I don't feel like he's covered nationally to the degree he probably should have, because it's off the court, just he has the personality of like he talked about probably more than he is, and talk about when he gets to this point in the season, he is absolutely nuclear. And then you add a ring on, and add a championship to his legacy. That's gonna be tough to argue against, especially with this storyline. This is one of those, if they could pull it off in this scenario we're talking about, is like a storyline that you see in a documentary type thing. Like if
movies getting made, definitely
for sure. So it would be big for him.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Brady. I feel like this run is, if he goes out and win a championship, I mean, it's gonna be hard to deny Jimmy. But I think top 50 player of all time, first ballot Hall of Fame, automatically. We talk about the accolades you said, like, oh, some people are going to talk about, oh, he doesn't have that much accolades. Let me break it down. 5 All-NBA selections, 5 defensive All-NBA selections. Also, he won a gold medal in 2016. If he wins a championship, I don't see how you could deny, like, top 50 player of all time. And also, like I said, it just gets, like, very, very serious, because he's one of the greatest playoff risers this league has ever seen. So it's, you add all that and you win a championship, first ballot Hall of Fame, how can you deny that? So I want to ask you, though, other than this run that we're seeing right now, this finals run or potential playoff run is the best run since who, would you say?
Ooh. I mean, would it be Dirk? Would that be the run that when they kind of went on that run and we started out this show talking about that big 3 run, and they ran into that wall in the finals, obviously, behind Dirk. So I think that would kind of be the one comparison I could give. I mean, like I said, I'm 19 years old, so I can't go back in the day, probably like
I respect it. Yeah.
But that feels like but like I said, that's what makes this so different, is because it's an 8 seed. Like, this is a play-in team that made this run that was 3 minutes from not making the playoffs. So it just feels like it's different than anything you can even compare it to.
Yeah, I would say Kawhi's run was pretty special when he went to the Toronto Raptors and stuff like that. But they had a good team. It was kind of like you dropped off Kawhi Leonard, and it was just kind of like, all right, they had a championship team, and Martin Rosen and Kyle Lowry couldn't get it done together. So they got Kawhi, upgraded, boom, went on that crazy run. And then they beat the Golden State Warriors. Even sometimes people are going to say, like, well, Kevin Durant didn't play. This was still the Golden State Warriors. Also, like you said, Dirk Nowitzki, 2011, was very phenomenal. Dirk beat the young KD in OKC Warriors. He beat the Los Angeles Lakers team that was coming off a title as well. So he beat some, and then he beat a prime. I don't know. It's tough because I look at Dirk Nowitzki, and he beat a prime like LeBron. I just said he was the best LeBron version I ever seen was down in Miami. So he beat that version of LeBron, and also Dwayne Wade, who most people would say after 2011 probably was the final like true peak of Dwayne Wade. Probably had another 2012 maybe, but like 2011 was like peak prime Dwayne Wade. And if they would have won that series, Dwayne Wade would have been Finals MVP. So it's tough, but I definitely agree with you. I'm going to say the 2011. I'm also going to say Kawhi Leonard's run was very phenomenal, very special. But let's talk about a potential finals matchup between the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat. What are your key takeaways of what the Miami Heat would have to do to be successful against the Denver Nuggets?
So it's interesting because there's always, in all these series we've seen, they've taken something away. And I'll give an example in the Knicks series, because they basically said, we're going to cut off the head of the snake in Brunson, and we're going to help down, and we're going to make you beat us from 3, because the Knicks did not shoot well from 3 overall, and they just kept making them shoot, pick the right guys to shoot. I don't know if you can do that as much against the Nuggets, because they have a guy as a hub in Nikola Jokic that there's just nothing we've seen like him that can make the reads and make you pay in other ways, that if you help down off the wrong guy, he's going to make that pass and he's going to make you pay, so you can't fully help down. So then now you have to make the decision: do you cut off Jokic? Do you cut off the role players' 3-point shooting? And you have to make that decision. So it'll be interesting the way they go about it. And you mentioned before, you gave the comparison kind of the against Giannis and how they kind of went about it. They built a wall. Like that was the thing that Miami came up with all of a sudden, was building the wall against Giannis.
Yeah.
But it felt like previously when they've done it, they had the personnel for it. This year, people were saying they didn't have it because they just went all season without a power forward. They finally ended up picking up Kevin Love. So I think a decent size adjustment that they can make is, it sounds crazy, but they've done it a lot, is like putting Kevin Love type on Jokic and just having Bam be kind of the helper wise and then freely just kind of making his move. They'll probably put him on Gordon and let him move around and kind of just disrupt things. But there's going to have to be wrinkles in that way. I'm not totally worried about the offense for Miami, it seems, because if there's small enough defenders on the floor, Jimmy's going to get the switch and he's going to find a way to kind of make them pay. And they don't have as many things as Nikola Jokic is. He's not an elite rim protector, which is the one thing that could throw off Jimmy in that range. When he has like those smaller defenders and he gets to the basket, he has to worry about even in this Boston series. It's like, where's Rob Williams at? Where's he going to help over from? Or even in the finals against LA in the bubble, it was, where's Anthony Davis at? In this scenario, he has less to worry about offensively. So it'll be interesting. But the real hard part is for some reason, like I started here saying, they were the 27th worst 3-point shooting team in the regular season. You see that kind of flip on its head in this playoff run. But you see the way the Nuggets are playing and the way they're shooting, it's like, can you match them from three? It feels like that's the question a lot of times in the game of basketball right now. It's like, who could shoot better from three? But that feels like it more than anything with the way that team's playing right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But also I feel like it's kind of refreshing. We're getting potentially we're going to get real hoops in this NBA's finals with the Denver Nuggets and Miami Heat, because I feel like, even though, like you said, the Miami Heat 27 in the regular season for the 3-point line and things of that nature for his field goal percentage wise, but also look at the Denver Nuggets. I feel like both the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat kind of play the game the right way, because they just don't only score on the outside. They can score in the mid-range, they can score in the post, and it's going to be very refreshing to see, like, just not a team that's playing that analytic style ball of just slashing 3-point only, because we know Nikola Jokic, he can get in the post. He can score in a variety of ways. You know, Jamal Murray can come off a pick and roll, hit you at the second level on the basketball court, hit a jump shot. So it's going to be very, very interesting. And we know what Jimmy Butler does as well. Jimmy Butler, he gets to his spots, and and even Bam Adebayo, he gets to his spots as well. But it's interesting you said that putting Kevin Love on Nikola Jokic and kind of having Bam roam. I feel like the Los Angeles Lakers, even though they lost the series, I felt like the Los Angeles Lakers kind of gave you a little defensive formula of what you can do with the Denver Nuggets. They kind of did what you were talking about, potentially what they can do with Kevin Love. They did that with Rui Hachimura, and then they had Anthony Davis kind of roaming the basket. I don't know if Kevin Love is going to be the guy to do it. Maybe, Caleb Martin, maybe, he's a little small, but I feel like athletic-wise, he can kind of maybe do some things, and then you let Bam roam. But that is an excellent strategy that you talk about. But talk to me about Jamal Murray, though. We spent a lot of time talking about Nikola Jokic, but talk to me about Jamal Murray, because this is a guy that just came off averaging 32 points in the Western Conference Finals and didn't even win the little stupid-ass trophy that they got. Talk to me about Jamal Murray. What are some things that the Miami Heat are going to have to do to, slow him down?
So it's the interesting part about, I mentioned Jimmy, the way they've changed things offensively throughout this run, but the thing they've done the most is change them around defensively. Like, they started out in the Milwaukee series, he was guarding a lot of Drew. He was just going to muck up their actions with Drew and Giannis and all those pick and rolls. Move on to the Knicks series, they start out with him on Brunson. Immediately, like game 2-ish, they change it. They say, we're going to put Jimmy on RJ Barrett. We're going to have him help off and kind of wreck things off ball. And then you look at this series, they're back to putting him on ball and Jaylen Brown and Tatum. The question is, in the Nuggets series, does Jimmy Butler guard Jamal Murray, or did they use him as that off-ball roamer? And I kind of think I lean in the direction of him guarding Jamal Murray. So even if I go through the matchups down the line, like if we say Love on Jokic and we say Bam on Gordon, Max Strus on Porter, and then the question is, do you switch Gabe Vincent and Jimmy? And I think Gabe probably guards Pope in this scenario, and Jimmy will stick Jamal Murray. But it's an interesting dynamic here, because one of the best things on Jimmy, we could talk about Jimmy on ball defensively and all things, but there's nothing better than Jimmy off ball defensively. We know what he can do when he hits passing lanes. He can read stuff like a free safety. He's just so good in that department, but I don't think you have another option. I think they can move things around, but I just feel like Jamal Murray you have to be physical with him, it feels like, just because you mentioned Jimmy getting to his spots. When Jamal Murray gets to his spots, man, he can get into a big time rhythm. Like if he starts getting comfortable with that pull up and everything
Takes
else
one.
it just takes over. So it'll be interesting to see what they throw. And like I said, I keep mentioning Jimmy, but this feels like a Spo thing. Like putting Spo in this scenario where you mentioned this is going to be real hoops. Like this is an absolute basketball series that we would be potentially be watching. And Spo would just kind of be in a candy store. Like he would just be sitting there loving this because he loves those moments of being able to kind of just getting in the film room type thing. So Jamal Murray's going to be a big thing because much as we talk about Tyler being out, and I don't know if we should expect him in the finals, he's the kind of guy that could match that in a scenario because the Heat need that extra pull-up guy, and I feel like I've been saying that every series, and somehow they keep grinding out series without that guy.
It's tough.
But matching on paper, Tyler would be able to kind of match the pull-up sense. So we'll see how they go about it. But defensively, it feels like a lot of Jimmy on Murray.
Yeah, it's so crazy because I don't think Tyler Hero is going to play this series, and then people were talking about, well, even if he does come back, like what minutes he's going to take and like who he's going to replace and stuff like that. It's Tyler. Like the Miami Heat are a better team with Tyler Hero because, like you said, like regardless of what they're doing right now, they're playing very phenomenal. But if you add Tyler Hero, that's another weapon. That's another shot creator. A legitimate argument can be made that he's probably the best shot creator. We just talk about a pure scoring standpoint on the Miami Heat, and we know what Jimmy Butler is capable of. But it's going to be very interesting. I think the matchups, we talked about a lot of the matchups. I think the matchups of who's going to really kind of propel in this series and win this series is probably the role players versus Denver and the role players versus the Miami Heat. The role players in Miami Heat have basically been the reason, outside of Jimmy Butler going nuclear, have been the reason why this run has happened. Gabe Vincent's playing phenomenal. We had Duncan, who was playing terrible all year long. He's stepping up. He's playing phenomenal. You know, I got Kevin Love, a guy that people thought was kind of like, you know, just washed and done. He stepped up. So I think which set of role players is going to excel in this series is going to like be kind of like really the key, I would say, for going forward.
And you mentioned a lot of the role players, and the guy that feels like he's headlining a lot of that is Caleb Martin. The guy has absolutely emerged throughout this season, but specifically in this playoff run in this series right now. You mentioned Jamal Murray averaging 32 and getting the Western Conference MVP.
Yeah, Caleb 19.
Caleb Martin, if he has a big game in him in this game, in this next game, he could be in the running. It feels like that's how important he's been in this series. Like he is. I don't know what he's at now, but I know before this game 4, he was averaging 19 points per game in this series, and it's like he's doing it efficiently. Even in game 4, he was at 14 points on 6 of 6 shooting in the first half, and it's like that's why I mentioned before the battle of the 3-point shooting because that feels like the main role player kind of thing. It's kind of see who
definitely.
But Caleb's going to be important, like I said, because of the way that he's been kind of manipulating the game. He's been for some reason hitting just going crazy from 3. If you react
corner shots.
He's the guy you're helping off of. If for any team you're playing, he's recognized that every day. He says, I'm the guy you're going to help off of. So he keeps making them pay. And then when they shoot out off a closeout, he's getting to the basket and he's doing crazy moves around the rim. And it's like, okay, what do you do with this guy now? If this is the guy I'm helping off of. But then if you mention the shooters like Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, if you can get them going, they have to manipulate certain things. If they can move Jokic around in the drop and see if they have to start playing at the level or start playing deep, they're not going to be able to play that deep drop if Duncan Robinson's being spammed off handoffs every 2 seconds, which they've been relying on really heavily in this playoff run, obviously, because we keep mentioning Tyler, but he was such a big part of their offense that they had to kind of reshape this offense. They had to figure out different ways to get to certain triggers. And Duncan handoffs, it feels like we're back in 2020. They've relied on that. And then you hit on Kyle Lowry earlier. I think he's going to be important, especially this last game in game 4, Gabe Vincent rolled his ankle at the end of the game. We'll see what his status is moving forward. They're just going to need a lot of these role players to step up. And I know the Nuggets have, they played, I feels like less guys than Miami has rotationally. They have to find a way to outmatch them because even the Knicks series, we went into that series saying, well, the Knicks advantage is the physicality. It's also the bench points. And every one of those games, Miami came out and just washed them off the bench. And you mentioned Kyle. And it was everybody down the line. They just kept being able to beat them in that range. So if Miami can do that, obviously things look different in this matchup.
And I think I know a lot of people are going to pick the Denver Nuggets to win the finals matchup because a lot of people feel like talent-wise, they have so much talent. They have a more talented team than the Miami Heat. Now, we're not going to front and pretend like that's not the reality of the situation. But I think what people are underestimating when it comes to Miami Heat that they're going to have over the Denver Nuggets That's experience. They've been to the finals before. They have
For sure.
a Hall of Fame coach, arguably the best coach in the game. It's probably not even arguably, if you want to be honest. And then they
Uh-huh.
have players that have done it at the highest level. When we talk about went up against, LeBron James when he was still, probably the last year of his prime in 2020. Anthony Davis was probably the best version we've seen Anthony Davis in 2020 in that bubble. So they kind of done it. So it's going to be very interesting to see like if the nervousness of the Denver Nuggets kind of like catches up to them, because I feel like if you're nervous, if you're, you miss one game, because that's all it takes. Like it takes like losing one game or losing one game at home or losing like a
Yeah.
game you're supposed to win. And then that can really dictate the series going forward with the Miami Heat. But for this next segment, it's called the Truth Teller segment, Brady. And basically, I'm going to read you a tweet from he or she, and then you're going to decide if this person's a truth teller or not. Sounds good?
Got you.
All right. First one. If Jimmy Butler can win us a ring, this will go down as the most memorable NBA championship in Miami Heat history. This is from Shardy the God.
I believe so. I mean, the first one is just so bittersweet, just because that 06 one and the fact that it's similar because that team was counted out as well.
Counted out, yeah.
Did not have a shot, and then they have a young Dwayne Wade emerging, and ends up the rest is history. But I don't know. This is right there. Like the fact of the storyline that we talked about at the beginning, and the fact of them having this comeback season, the fact that it's kind of resurrecting Jimmy Butler's whole era here because he's put so much on the line this entire era of playing in a Miami Heat jersey and be able to capitalize on that. From a fan base perspective, nobody thought they'd be here, and I think it would be appreciated in that way if he was able to capitalize.
It would definitely make things more sweeter. I was, 2006? That championship with the Miami, that was the first ever championship. And Dwayne Wade, like you said, was 23 years old, third year in the league, and they were down 0-2, and then he went basically Michael Jordan. That was like one of the craziest like runs we have seen in NBA Finals history. So that was very special. And I think what made it more special was because Shaq was essentially a role player during that series. Like people talk about like, oh, he had Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq wasn't the Shaq in LA a few years ago. He was really a role player in that series. They kind of like really cut off, Shaquille O'Neal's performance and his dominance during that series. But it's tough because if they go out and win, I feel you. But at the same time, I look at like 2013 with the San Antonio Spurs and like them being down. I remember me being in my room. It was down 3-2. And before the situation happened, like I had tears rolling down my eyes. I was crying because I was like, damn, like LeBron James is really about to lose again. Like Dwayne Wade is really about to lose again. I was like so like angry. And then I remember it happened. And I'm like, oh shit, like this is crazy. And then they went on and won game 7. And to me, arguably, people talk about 2016 LeBron James, but LeBron James arguably probably played in like, to me personally, 3 of like the craziest finals this league has ever seen. And he's won those finals, but that's a different take for that's a big argument for another day.
It might depend on the way this ends as well. We can't judge it yet because it depends on how this finals goes. Because if Jimmy has like an incredible finals run and he has some big games in there, then we probably look at this differently. So we have to see how it wraps up as well, probably.
Definitely. Next one from Dante. Miami Heat having a historic postseason run makes me think how wild of a non-factor Tyler Hero is. They definitely should trade that man during the offseason. Truth teller or
not? I mean, I'm not against the fact of trading him if for the right piece. Like, he's not an untradeable guy at this point. Yeah. But the thing is Tyler ends up getting a lot of the brunt of things, it feels like, over time. No matter who the guy was that is out on this run, and if they go on this run and somebody specifically is out, that guy was going to be thrown in the trade machine immediately throughout the playoff run. Like, that's the way this was going to go. It just hurts because you see them switching up the play style and the way things are going, and the fact that they end up doing it without him. It hurts in that area. But like it's not crazy to say that he gets traded in the offseason if the right guy. Like, we're going to hear about the Damian Lillards every single offseason. We're going to hear about the same guys that are out there being thrown around in the market. And Tyler Hero is their most interesting trade piece because they're not, Bam Adebayo is not going anywhere. So the one guy they could throw around there is Tyler Hero. So it's not crazy to say, but I wish we could save that conversation for the offseason until after that we have a long time to discuss that.
It's crazy though, because even though I feel like even if they win the finals, I still think they need to make moves. That's
Mhm.
is that crazy to think about?
It's not crazy. I mean, this everybody knows the term "run it back" down here because they've done it a couple times and it hasn't worked out. And we discussed
Yeah,
it all season because they ran this team
yeah.
back, and you see the way that they landed. But then all of a sudden, this run, I don't know if that changes anything. I think they still need to do things. The only difference is I'll mention is if they win a ring, I
Mhm.
think the you re-sign a lot of the guys that maybe you're talking about that you're not re-signing, like the Max Strus and Gabe Vinces of the world that you're saying we might have to
Yeah.
re-sign one. I think you bring both back. Like that's the
Okay.
thing that changes. Uh,
Mm.
but definitely you still need just because if you win a championship in this scenario, I don't think you just live with it. I think Jimmy Butler doesn't just live. He's not complacent. He's gonna say I want
Yeah.
another.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I feel like what you said about Bam is needs to be talked about more because I feel like before this postseason run, you mentioned Tyler Hero was like, oh, if the right piece come along. At first, in the previous off season, people were like, no, Bam is untouchable and things of that nature. But then this season happened, it was kind of like, well, has Bam hasn't really taken that leap that most people expected. But this postseason run, he's looking like we're starting to see like his ultimate potential, what he can be. And people don't talk about the responsibilities that he has on. People talk about Jimmy Butler, but the responsibilities that Bam has,
Anchor.
I can't. It's crazy. It's like I know he's not as much as Nikola Jokic, but it's on that level. We talk about defense, guarding 1 through 4, guarding 1 through 5 on the basketball court. The handoffs, sending pin downs, all the different types of screens. Also had to score at times. So people need to understand, like, yo, Bam's role and what he does. It's not a lot of centers or just players in general in the NBA that can do the things that he does on the basketball floor. Last one from Rashad Phillips. Joker not winning the MVP season was a blessing in disguise. It took the pressure off him and the entire organization. The Nuggets become more team focused while trying to live up to the MVP storyline. The same storyline cost the Sixers. A lot of the game is mental. Truth teller or not.
I think that's true, and I think I will say it helps Jokic. It sounds weird, but I think it helps Jokic's case with the fact that they're not going to use the championship thing to him because of the way Embiid keeps kind of falling out of the race in the playoff runs.
Yeah.
Like it's like if he can't get to a conference finals, and you see now Nikola's in an NBA finals, and even if he falls short, it's like you can't use that against him when the guy's running
Yeah.
mate in the MVP race is the guy that's getting it that never has been to a conference finals. So.
Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting because I think finally now I think that as much as I talk about Miami in the national perspective,
Mhm.
it's just funny to still see the national perspective for Denver. It's like we shouldn't just be looking at box scores for this guy. Like this is a guy that is
Yeah.
an elite player to watch. Like we need to be watching him more. And the fact, and even after they win a series and go on to the NBA Finals, the big topic is the LA Lakers still. So
Yeah.
it's about hoops. Like this is the whole point. So
Well,
I
the
don't know.
big time television companies and stuff of that nature, they're anything for clicks. So
Right.
they got to talk about the Lakers, the Miami Heat, well, Miami Heat is a little bit, but the New York Knicks, things of that nature, because it's going to generate buzz and stuff like that. They talk about Miami when they're doing well, but when they're doing bad, it's quiet. But it's interesting you talk about Nikola Jokic. I feel like with this run, like you said, it's kind of like I don't want to hear anything else when we talk about like you know Anthony Davis,
So
Joel Embiid. I kind of want to even. I'll be honest. Even Giannis Antetokounmpo for a certain degree, because even though Giannis won the championship and things of that nature, when we talk about completeness, I understand that all three of those guys affect the game a different way because they all play defense way better than Nikola Jokic. But
Mhm.
one could say, like, would you rather have the more complete offensive player when you have a great team defense around you,
Yeah.
an offensive player that has no flaws? When we talk about one of the best playmakers, one of the best 3 level scorers, one of the best screeners, one of the best guys that can dominate in the post. Would you rather
Mhm.
have a complete offensive player who is not really the best defender, or would you rather have those other guys that really can't do, you know, half of what he can do
Yeah.
offensively? I think the question has to be like, we got to stop talking about like Anthony Davis and Joel Embiid, who's better when it comes to and Nikola Jokic. I think that's a wrap. And even Giannis Antetokounmpo, I love Giannis. I think Giannis is a top player in this game, a legit argument, top 3, of course. But like, I think if Nikola Jokic wins this championship, it's going
Uh-huh.
to be a conversation about that as well. But final question, Brady: top 3 favorite Miami Heat players of all time. Final question.
Ooh. So Dwayne
I know you're
Wade.
young. I know you're young.
Yeah. But Dwayne Wade's still number one. That's the guy that got you into basketball. So he's the pillar of Miami Heat. So he's going to be number one. Honestly, number two is Jimmy Butler. And he's kind of going up and down that list in general on the all-time list. But personally, just for me being able to cover this team in general and just being around it, as I mentioned before, like it's not only the on-court stuff where he goes absolutely nuclear, the fact that he's just the off-court stuff. Like it just take a scroll through his social medias once in a while, or just listen to stuff he does. It's like he's just such a likable guy down here. So that would be number two, and man, number three. It's tough because there's obviously everybody's gonna say the LeBron factor just because the excitement. Then there's guys, but I honestly,
it's your personal. You're not the bet. Yeah, you're personal.
I think it's because it's still just because from covering this team specifically. I think it's Bam, honestly, right now. The Bam is definitely three. I just think he gets talked about in such a. You mentioned before all the things that he does, and he gets talked about in such an interesting light. The things he does on the defensive end is just things I just haven't seen. Like it's just things that you just don't notice. It's the fact that he doesn't have like elite size in terms of he's not just 7-footer out there blocking shots. He's 6'9", but he can do everything from a rim protector to a perimeter defense to running an offense when you need him as a pillar. Like you mentioned with the handoffs, with he's not Jokic as a passer, but they'll use him as like that. They're not afraid to do it. Then they're using him as a screener. And then this regular season, we saw pre-All-Star break before he was elected an All-Star. Like he took a jump in terms of the jumper. Like he consistently the efficiency, be able to get to his spots and do all that stuff. So he'd be three.
Yeah, if he keeps developing that's the next part. A consistent mid-range shot. Then we're looking at potential of a guy that can possibly go on average, 22 from that like 18, 19 points a game for like that 22 to 25 range, and kind of can be like, potentially a semi version of like, I don't want to say Kevin Garnett, but it's kind of like
that's the one that gets thrown around, right?
Yeah, that's the one that kind of gets thrown around. So I'm not mad at that. For me, I would say, Dwayne Wade, of course, favorite player of all time. And then I would go with LeBron James just because of the points we talked about earlier in the podcast. Just about, I think that was the best version of LeBron James I've ever seen in my life. And then I would say number three for me is Jimmy Butler. I know I didn't put Alonzo Mourning on the list, but like what Jimmy Butler has done for this city, and kind of like, it was people talk about like going and LeBron James replacing Kobe Bryant. When we talk about it's hard to go and replace Kobe with the Los Angeles Lakers. But you know what else is hard? It was hard for a player to come in and kind of like take on the mantle of the Miami Heat when Dwayne Wade left as well. And that's what kind of Jimmy Butler has done. So if he goes out and win a championship, I mean, it's just kind of like what can you really say? It's like we talked about earlier in the podcast. Top 50 player of all time, first ballot Hall of Famer to me. So, but once again, we have Brady Hawk. Thank you. I really appreciate you for coming on. Your knowledge is phenomenal. You're only 19 years old, bro. I mean, keep doing amazing things, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Once again, this is Hoop Ties with Ahmad K. Smith. Make sure you go like, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And also go watch on YouTube. We're gone, man. Peace.